talks here on NBS history. I have my friend Justin here, who I studied with in university, and he's going to tell us a little story that happened in Chile.
So when most people are thinking about Latin American history, the big events that stand out are always Cuba and Argentina. There's often other major events that are ignored or put aside by people, and I think the biggest one of these is what's referred to as the Chilean Genocide. Basically encompasses a big power struggle between two government figures, which is Salvador Allende and Augusto Pinochet. Salvador Allende was democratically elected to power in 1970 and was the first Marxist to be elected to a Latin American government pretty much ever.
Yeah, it was. Officially, in a real democratic
in a real democratic election. And the reason we say that will be made clear later when it comes to certain other government coups and people who were overthrown. But basically, his far leftist economy put Chile in a really rough spot. For a country whose #1 export was copper, was making a lot of dealings with the United States. Unfortunately, they weren't able to sustain a very strong economy. The copper price went to garbage, dropped nearly 30% between 1971 and 1972. And the US, particularly the CIA, were in strong support of putting another leader in charge of Chile, because Salvador Allende was going to very badly damage their trade relations when it came to copper.
Also, just to mention, they ran up to about 300% in inflation. That was kind of the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, most of this hyperinflation was caused by Salvador Allende, who was trying to stabilize the economy, but his solution to this was raising wages across the board nearly 120%. This due to a lot of mining strikes, unhappy workers. But in doing this, started a hyperinflation cycle. The price of food and an average, whatever they call it, a basket of goods, or basket. It's referred to as a basket of goods, which is basically the average spending of a family or an individual per week. Price went up nearly 40% in 1 year. So basically the cycle started and people weren't able to sustain themselves, they weren't able to finance their homes, they weren't able to eat, whatever it was. So this caused a lot of worker strikes, to which Salvador Allende's solution was, well, we're just going to put up wages. Unfortunately, this absolutely put their economy into the ground. It ruined their copper trade, which made a lot of tension with the US. And forced the US government to back other political allies.
Not to mention, they were being undermined this entire time by the United States of America. Particularly the CIA was involved, and they were actively trying to destabilize this government, as they were in other places like they had done in Guatemala. And most of Latin America, that's the truth. The United States and Latin America.
Now, while the US couldn't put in any definitive military support, what they did was offer a lot of financial and political support to Allende's main opposition, which was Eduardo Frei. The US put up in 1972 more than $4 million in support of his political aspirations and trying to overthrow Salvador Allende. When this didn't work, this is when the coup of 1973 came about, backed by a military general by the name of Augusto Pinochet. The US and the CIA backed military operations. Sorry.
Oh, I mispronounced everything. I made aware of that in the comments, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying any of these words.
Yeah. So after, I believe, 1 or 2 failed kidnapping or assassination attempts, they staged a full military coup where not the House of Commons. Hang on. Sorry, just reading my notes here.
Technology, putting everything on the phone these days.
Yeah, well, where the presidential palace was bombed, and Allende later committed suicide. Apparently by a self-inflicted gunshot wound, although there are some reports that suggest he was assassinated by a member of the military team that staged the coup.
I imagine someone was just brushing off a gun and placing it nice on the table beside him.
Absolutely. I'm sure there were very calm negotiations, and an unfortunate accident ensued to which he was shot in the temple.
People land on bullets all the time.
Yeah. So when Augusto Pinochet took over in 1973, he basically created a full paramilitary organization and completely negated any form of political activity in the country of Chile. Anybody who was known to be socialist, leftist, Marxist, or who followed any of those regimes was either put into exile, was either imprisoned and tortured, or was killed and disappeared.
Disappeared.
Yeah. As some studies show, up to 3,000 Chileans were killed or never found again. Anywhere between 10 and 30,000 were tortured and imprisoned, to the point where they even used the Chilean National Stadium, I believe.
Yes.
And reports were given to the US where up to 5,000 people were imprisoned there at a time. And in the term of Pinochet's reign, up to 118,000 people total were imprisoned at the National Stadium of Chile, where they were either tortured or killed or sent off to exile for supporting any kind of leftist or Marxist political regimes. And from this military organization, basically, what Pinochet did is he implemented a formal ban on any form of democratic or political process, and instituted a full military control of the country of Chile.
Which was originally supposed to be for 1 year. Then he asked, I believe it was for an 8-year term till 1988, upon which there would be an election.
Yes.
But people didn't, by the years, people didn't believe he was going to go through with it, and he would just take power.
Well, more or less, but yeah, he banned all political activity and used the US's funding and support to basically rewrite the Chilean Constitution, which was originally written in 1925, which was quickly banned, and I believe it was in 1980 specifically. 1925. Yeah, on September 11th, 1980, they rewrote the Chilean Constitution, which, although they claim was a way of reinstancing democracy and gaining control, or sorry, giving control back to the people, it was just a way to merge all of the government factions together to give him the absolute power over the Chilean people.
Do you want to highlight some of the atrocities? Because there are some famous accounts. This is one of the countries that was responsible for the caravan of death.
This is true. So the biggest reports stemming from violation of human rights involved a lot of torture, mostly for information, trying to hunt down members of opposing political parties or surviving allies to Salvador Allende, so they could either be captured, imprisoned, killed, or exiled. And one of these groups was a paramilitary group, which was later nicknamed the Caravan of Death, who was a military, I believe, originated in the Chilean army.
They basically took a bunch of people in helicopters, the belligerents, political unwanteds, put them in a bunch of bags. I can't remember what they put in the bags to weigh them down, just toss them in the open ocean. These were the disappeared people also.
Yeah, that was, those were some of the more graphic videos and accounts of them, but also they were charged with relocating to specific towns in Chile, the capital, and certain places where Allende's political party members were said to be hiding, and they were basically tasked with capturing these certain what's the word I'm looking for? Not allies. members of Allende's cabinet, to either to bring them in for questioning or simply to exile them out of the country, to solidify their military hold on the country and to make sure that no political opposition could rise up to overthrow Pinochet. Once they felt that they had rid the country of all these people, that's when they went about, in 1980, rewriting the Constitution to give the military full power of all government factions, and basically created a merged version of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the police force, which became to be known the military junta, which was their government at the time. And that's when Augusto Pinochet was given an 8-year term to supposedly stabilize the economy and try to get out of the rut that Salvador Allende had put them in.
He didn't do a horrible job. I mean, it was atrocious, and it obviously wasn't the best job he could have done to stabilize the economy, but it did technically do some good.
Well, Augusto Pinochet was in no way an economist himself, purely military trained man, but he enlisted the help with the CIA of, I believe, 3 or 4 men from the University of, hang on, I've got this here. Yeah, from the University of Chicago, which they later became known as the Chicago Boys.
Yeah.
And to help stabilize the economy. And after analyzing the situation, they advised a very neoliberal economic ideas, as well as laissez-faire, and I believe what else did they do? Sorry, my notes are a little backwards here. And as well as encouraging a free market economy.
I don't know too much specifically about Chile during this period because in school I honestly did take a lot of Latin American history courses. You probably know that from my piece on Hernan Cortez, but I know more about the situation in Argentina. But I do know there's some overlapping situations in Latin America that did alter Chile a bit during this period. One of them was Operation Colombo, and this was, for Chile, this was when their secret police that were known as the INA, I don't know what it actually stands for, but it was, the secret police were disappearing the political dissidents, and at least 129 have been confirmed to be abducted and killed by them. On top of this, there was also Operation Condor, which was more or less a US-backed secret coalition in Latin America with other countries such as Peru and Argentina, where they would use terror tactics, assassination, and anything politically aggressive to get rid of Marxist ideals. Because this was, you know, the time and age when America was trying to fight communism wherever it might be. And Latin America had a lot of uprisings, a lot of Marxist ones. So the United States did everything it could to put money against anything communist.
And it was very difficult for the US to put direct military support into these conflicts, you know, coming off of the Vietnam War and
the failure of things like the Contra, which highlighted America's involvement, and other embarrassing endeavors like the CIA being in a biplane throwing bombs at Guatemala.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And it was these operations, like Operation Condor, which led most of the political refugees, we'll call them, to flee Chile, where up to 200,000 Chileans were supposedly exiled, most of them sneaking across to Argentina, but a lot of them spreading out amongst Latin America, which is what caused a lot of the trade restrictions between Argentina and Chile.
Also, the secret police of Chile, they were putting stamps on their passports to notify other governments when they would go to places like Argentina that these are political belligerents or Marxists. So a lot of these countries didn't open their doors up right away, if they did at all, and a lot of these people also disappeared.
Yeah, which is why most of them went to Argentina, because it was the only one that allowed them to come in before they ended up getting flagged. Now, Despite his best efforts, Augusto Pinochet wasn't able to completely stabilize the Chilean economy due to the low price in copper. Copper was Chile's #1 export, accounting for close to 40% of their export GDP during the 70s and early 80s. And because of the low price, it still made it very, very difficult for them to be economically stable and successful. So in 1988, they staged a referendum where it was actually suggested that Augusto Pinochet not represent his government, and they would let a civilian represent that branch instead, in order to show that the people still had control of Chile. Augusto Pinochet vetoed this idea and decided to run himself, and ended up losing in a 56% decision.
Which was surprising. The military believed he would win. It surprised a lot of people.
In general, the military believed he would win, but several of the key leaders of the army and navy had started to lose faith in Pinochet because of his lack of economic success. Although he did stabilize Chile a little bit, he wasn't able to bring them out of the rut that they were in. So they actually began to secretly fund and support the opposition, as did the church. The church was one of the biggest supporters of the overthrowing of Salvador Allende. But once they realized that the economy was not stabilizing and certain military rules implemented that weren't necessarily coinciding with the church's ideals, they also began to switch their support to the opposition in the late stages of Pinochet's rule. So in 1988, after losing the election and losing the referendum, they elected. I had his name in my notes somewhere. And of course I can't find it.
We keep going back to notes because we want to get all the figures right. Except
as close as we can. A lot of them were estimated and not properly documented, so in terms of numbers it's very difficult to put exact amounts on this. Especially since a lot of these people either fled the country without paperwork or...
And there's prone, in all incidences, I mean this isn't an official genocide, but they are going to exaggerate the numbers, and it is hard to pinpoint a good solid number. And in the case of Chile, even to this day, women are still going into these streets with the photos of their husbands who disappeared or their sons.
Yes. Yes, and actually many people have referred to it not as a genocide, but as a politicide, because of the destruction of the entire political system for close to 18 years. So in 1988, when Augusto Pinochet was finally relieved of power, although he stayed in office for 1 year more and remained the head of the military up until 1998, I believe.
He ran into some problems. He had ended up going on a trip to Britain. He was reprimanded because Spain had some people that were killed during this time or had disappeared. He went to trial. They said because of health conditions he had to go home. Once he got home, after a few years, they tried to put him on trial again for war crimes. But his plea was he wasn't mentally stable enough, I believe, to be put on trial. And then when they finally brought it up again, in I think about 2004, if I remember.
2006.
2006. He had died. He died shortly after, so they never got to actually put him on trial, which is, what happens to everyone. But
in essence, he kept delaying his trials and his procedures due to medical issues, and ended up dying of a heart condition, I think in 2006, before being finally convicted. He had been tried and appealed twice, I believe, and before they could close proceedings or open a new trial, he died of a heart condition.
His stance should have been, like the general from Sarajevo, I did nothing wrong.
Stop, please. Please sit down.
If anyone remembers that one, that's a chilling one.
More or less, but basically one of the biggest tragedies in Latin America. Complete destruction of any political system whatsoever.
Refugees are in Canada to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. One of them actually taught me in university. amen to him. Complete dissolution of any political system, military control of the government, up to 2% of the entire population either killed, exiled, or disappeared. Was a very, very bad time and often forgotten about when talking about Latin American history.
So, with that, just to put a quick end to this, you've probably noticed that these aren't like my usual episodes. I had my other friend Eric on a few times before this, if I'm posting these videos in the order I think. And I'm going to have more friends that I studied with, because I hope to do possibly long episodes discussing amongst us certain subjects and or a real podcast. I'll see how things go, but this is based solely on if people subscribe, because as nice as the views are, because we're doing quite good for a small channel, we really need subscribers. So if you could please click that button, it would help us a lot. And this has been NBS History.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and if more than 500 people subscribe this week, Craig will do the next video shirtless. Cheers.